Chances are if you're watching this video, you're getting schooled in the Ultra League. If you want to learn up on how to get better, you got to go to class. And this is Ultra League 101. Yeah, the Ultra League isn't a very friendly place. It's pretty confusing as far as a lot of matchups go, and it's pretty expensive. When it comes to the Great League, you can use really low-level Pokemon, and when it comes to the Master League, those Pokemon you can also use for like raids and rocket battles. The Ultra League, though, kind of weird. So if you're going to be making some investments in the Ultra League, you're going to want to make sure that they're good investments, right? In this video, I'm going to be letting you know what the best Pokemon are, the general flow of their matchups. I'm also going to give you some team building tips, and I'm going to direct you to some good resources so you can go beyond the classroom. My name is Ryan Swag. I'm the Swagfessor. Let's get into it. By the way, if you're interested in courses in the Great League and the Master League, I already got my Great League 101 video up, and the Master League one is coming soon. So subscribe to SwagTips. Get that checked out. So here we have my Ultra League simplified graphic showing the general matchups of the Ultra League. So the Ultra League has 3 different layers of rock, paper, scissors going on, which may sound a little bit complicated at first, but once I take you through it, it's going to be a lot easier than you think. The main rock, the center of this meta, is Giratina, both the origin form and the altered form. They're pretty tricky Pokemon to deal with. Basically, if you don't beat it, you're going to lose to it, and there's quite a few things that Giratina beats. Fortunately, you don't need to have Giratina in order to build an effective team, because there is a whole squad over here in the left corner that beat Giratina pretty consistently. When it comes to the Giratina beaters, the most consistent of the bunch are the fairy types that use Charm. They just show up, they resist dragon type damage, they deal super effective damage with Charm, their fast move. Regardless of if Giratina has shields or not, doesn't matter to the Charm users, they just keep using Charm until Giratina stops moving. And the Charm users are so dang powerful that if you're just not resisting them in general, you're probably going to be losing to them, making them central threats in this meta. Well, fortunately, there are stuff that beat the Charm users. We have Steel-type Pokemon and Ice-type Pokemon. The Steel types resist Charm and deal super effective damage back to them, so that's pretty straightforward. And then when it comes to the Ice types, well, Alolan Sandslash is part Steel type, so that, you know, he's the Steel type. Articuno's got some debuffing moves that help out. Lapras, though, Lapras is only going to get the one over on the Togekiss consistently. It kind of runs into issues against the other Charm users. And as far as that group is concerned, they are felled by the fighting/normal type Pokemon. I actually think normal type Pokemon are pretty interesting in this meta because they have the resistance to the ghost type attacks, but they can also fight back with their own ghost, dark, dragon, and ice type damage to counter them as well. So pretty good Pokemon. In general though, they are a little bit more flaky against the Dragon Breath Giratina set, but overall definitely pretty solid. And of course, fighting normal type Pokemon doesn't sound like they have much resistance to the Charm users. The Charm users basically steamroll them. One thing I want to point out to you guys quick is our buddy Toxicroak over here. Toxicroak is a little tricky because Toxicroak doesn't have any plays into Giratina. However, it does beat all the fighting normal type Pokemon, does good against the Steel Ice group, and has that Sludge Bomb to take out the Fairy type Pokemon. So what it loses here, it gains here. So Toxicroak, part of the fighters, but not exactly one of the blues, if you will. So by this point, if you don't have a Giratina and you're not looking to power one up, you're probably thinking, man, these 3 groups sound pretty good, right? Well, building a team with 2 of these Pokemon, not a bad idea. But building it with 3 might leave you vulnerable to the yellow triangle over here. Yeah, so we got water types, fire types, and grass types, and in general, all these types have a pretty good advantage over the blue triangle Pokemon. Now, of course, these guys also have rock, paper, scissors with themselves, maybe a little bit more clearly defined for the old school Pokemon fans. Fire beating grass, grass beating water, water beating fire. For the most part, this group does a really good job at beating the other group. Many of the water type Pokemon are able to outbulk the fairy type Pokemon. Fire type Pokemon resist them and deal super effective damage to the steel types and the ice types. And then the grass type Pokemon, well, I guess Venusaur, mostly Venusaur, is able to resist the Charm users, resist the fighting type attacks, and not too shabby against the steel and ice type Pokemon that have grass vulnerabilities. Now, as per usual, there are some mold breakers in this group as well. Just like there's Pokemon in here that can't tolerate Dragon Breath Giratina, there are some Pokemon in the yellow group that can't tolerate blue group Pokemon. For example, we have Shiftry over here. Shiftry has a sub-dark typing, so it's actually vulnerable to Charm and to the fighting type attacks. However, because of the dark typing, it's also able to have some counterplay into the Giratinas and some good neutral coverage. Similarly, we got Gyarados. Gyarados uses Dragon Breath, has no resistance to the Fairy types, so it's probably going to get mauled down by the Fairy type Pokemon. That said, it's got Dragon Breath, so pretty good counterplay into the Giratinas as well, despite not doing so hot against the Fairies. So basic team building strat, you could pick a Giratina, pick something from the blue group, pick something from the yellow group, and then you got the basic rock, paper, scissors, right? You've got coverage for the yellow group because you got Giratina, you got coverage for the blue group because you got the yellow group Pokemon, and then you got coverage for Giratina because you got the blue group. Of course, you could double down on either of these two groups here. You can't double down on Giratina because they have the same Pokedex number, so you can't run two Giratinas in the same team. But you can double down on either of these two groups to good effect. You could do a nice like paper, rock, rock type strategy. However, the start to any great team in the Go Battle League is picking a good lead. And to help you do that, I got a nice lead infographic. So this graphic here, link in the description, highlights the 5 best leads in the Ultra League and some shared counters between them. Basically, if you're not leading with the best, you're going to want to make sure that you've got your bases covered, right? Like if you're trying to pick a counter lead to that pesky Swampert, well, maybe you'd want to get a Swampert counter lead that can also manage charm users in Giratina too, such as Articuno. So you can use this graphic to help you build your team. You pick a good, strong, solid, defined lead. Let's say you pick Articuno. Then you can go back to this graphic here, and you're like, okay, Articuno sounds pretty solid, but it has issues with this group here. And then Articuno also has trouble with the fire and water type Pokemon. Because you're smart, you know Articuno is flying in ice, and it doesn't have much to fear from the grass type Pokemon, but fire and water, a little bit scary for Articuno. Well, as far as your team building process goes, if you were to pick a grass type Pokemon to counter the water types, and then a water type to counter the fire types, then you'd be well protected against this group that counters you, and the steel type Pokemon that might give Articuno some trouble, while also leading with Articuno. And then of course, because you have Articuno in the lead slot, you're able to handle the Giratinas. And that is the basic team building process. You can do this with just about any Pokemon. Now you might be wondering, Ryan Swag, what's up with these non-grouped Pokemon up here? Yeah, the Pokemon up here are non-grouped picks. Basically, they deviate from the norm enough that I couldn't really fit them on the graphic, but they're good enough that I recognize their merits and put them up here in the upper right corner. If you want to use these Pokemon, I suggest that you have a little bit more knowledge going into the Ultra League about their matchups, what they beat, what they lose to, and then try to shape that around there. But if you are a newer player and you're not that familiar with the Ultra League and you don't want to spend tons of Stardust trying to figure it out, I'd say stay away from these picks for the most part. I mean, Ampharos basically is a yellow triangle Pokemon. Cresselia is kind of like a charm user. Mewtwo is, this is Armored Mewtwo by the way, kind of weird. And then Alolan Muck is also pretty tricky to deal with too because its matchups like change a lot based off of what fast move it has. So these Pokemon, a little bit more tricky to work with. The grouped picks down here, all pretty straightforward. Now, of course, these aren't the only Pokemon that are viable in the Ultra League. They're just ones that I picked out for this graphic because I feel like they're simple, consistent, and good. For example, there are other Fire-type Pokemon that can work. Moltres and Arcanine are good, fine Fire types. They do the job pretty well. It's just, Typhlosion and Charizard here are a little bit more boss than they are. Well, if you are curious about implementing alternative picks, ones that the Swagman did not point out for you, well, you'll want to turn to alternative resources to make sure that you're picking the good picks. Also, the meta changes over time. This might be the Ultra League 101 right now, but might not be the Ultra League 101 in a couple months. Niantic releases a new Pokemon, and it's like, death to Giratina, haha. That could change the meta up a bit. The question is, how are you going to prepare for these meta changes? Well, one good resource you can use is GamePress. GamePress has a PvP tier list that they update for the Ultra League. So as champions rise and fall, you can see their numbers go up and down here on the tier list. Then we got the Silpharina here. They have a nice compilation of resources that you can use outside of just GamePress. So if you want to hear from some independent Redditors or other websites, other creators, they have some pretty good facts here. In fact, they even have my OG Ultra League 101 guide, which will soon be replaced by this guide. And then, of course, we have the master, PvPoke, where if you want to figure out stuff on your own, run your own simulations and try to figure out what's going on, definitely a really good resource to use. Also, if you are interested in using like Cresselia or Armored Mewtwo, you're going to want to get really familiar with this website because a lot of their matchups can be IV dependent. It can get pretty tricky. By the way, if you're curious about PvP IVs, how do they work? I got a nice video on that already to help simplify it for you. And with these resources combined, I think you're ready to tackle the Ultra League. To recap, how to build a good team in the Ultra League. Well, go with my lead graphic. It highlights the 5 best leads that you can roll with and Pokemon that can counter multiple of them at once. Then from there, after you got your lead selected, find out what weaknesses and advantages that Pokemon has, and then find out which Pokemon back it up pretty good. And there you have it, a team of 3. And then, as time rolls on, updates happen in the game, champions rise and fall. You can always check out the resources I provided to you to better adjust the meta as things get changed. And of course, if there are big sweeping changes in Pokemon Go, I'll make a new updated guide for you guys. So make sure to subscribe. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips, man. Like if you're thinking about countering a Giratina lead, well, it might be good to know that your lead counter can do other stuff too. For example, let's say you want to lead with Articuno. You can see Articuno's got a strong matchup against the Swampert, the Giratinas, and Clefairy-type Pokemon. They are Clefairy-type Pokemon. The Fairy-type Pokemon.